Did you know that Harry Potter changed the law? I don't mean the character Harry Potter. He didn't wave his magic wand over the law and magically change it. I mean the movie Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone changed the actual law in the real world. Everyone knows these movies made billions of dollars. Most movies don't have the power to change UK laws in order to get made, though, but Harry Potter did. Here's what happened. When the movie was getting ready to shoot in 2000, the UK had a very strict child labor laws. Obviously, that's a good thing, but the laws were so strict that it was impossible to shoot Harry Potter there. They couldn't make a movie starring 10 children if those children couldn't work longer hours on the film. That meant the movie would have to be made in the US. That was bad news for the UK. It would mean an iconic British series would be an American movie, and it was also a huge financial loss for the country. So at the last minute, the British government rallied to change the laws. It passed, and the rest is history. Harry Potter was made in the UK. That's just one example of the many times that movies have made such an impact that they've changed the law. On this episode of Hammer's Law, we're talking about the unbelievable impact movies have had on the legal system. Movies are one of the most popular forms of entertainment. They can bring about powerful change in the real world, too. For example, the 1988 documentary, The Thin Blue Line, a true crime documentary, was justice gone wrong. A man was convicted of murdering a police officer, but evidence pointed to someone else. The attention from this documentary led to the case being reopened. The accused man, who had wrongly served 12 years, was cleared of the crime and released. The next movie came from a talented Japanese filmmaker. He made many socially conscious films, but this film didn't have the impact that he expected. The movie Street of Shame was made by director Kenji Mizoguchi in 1956. It was a realistic story of 5 women whose life experiences led to them to work as prostitutes in a brothel. That description might make you think it's an exploitation film with lots of sexual content, or you might think it's a cautionary tale to warn women to avoid the same fate. The movie is actually a compassionate story of women forced to deal with terrible economic conditions. The director hoped it would help people understand and empathize with the characters, but the impact was not what he hoped. The movie was a box office success that found a supportive audience. That may have been why the government reacted angrily about it. A few months after the release and success of the film, prostitution became illegal in Japan. The director had hoped to spread awareness and empathy for people with a hard and desperate life. Instead, it encouraged the government to punish those people even further. The next film starred one of the most famous stars in the history of Hollywood. Marilyn Monroe had a tragically short career, dying at the age of 36 after only an 11-year film career. But her legacy is huge. It included an important change in Hollywood contracts that most people don't know about. There was a time when Hollywood contracts controlled an actor's life. They decided what appearances they could do and what movies they would be in. They even prevented movie stars from going on TV shows or Broadway. Studios held all the power for a long time. That changed in 1955 when 20th Century Fox released her film, The 7-Year Itch. It was an enormous hit, and Monroe knew that her stardom was on the rise. The studio knew it too, which meant she was able to use that star power when it came time to update her contract. Monroe got a huge raise that was unheard of for the time, but she also wanted it in her contract that she could work with whomever she wanted. That meant specific filmmakers, studios, and even independent producers. 20th Century Fox didn't want to lose their biggest star, so they agreed to her request. Once the word got out that she got a great deal, other big stars demanded similar things. It was too late to turn back, and studio control over performers slowly disappeared. It wasn't long before the studio system fell apart. It was all due to the smart decisions of the clever and talented Miss Monroe. Marilyn Monroe's story ended very sadly, and she spent a good deal of her late life dealing with depression. Hollywood exposed the way the system lets down people with mental illness in this next film. The Snake Pit was based on a true story of women's experience in mental institutions. The film exposed horrible behaviors and treatments, electroshock therapy, straitjackets, and abuse from mental facility employees. The movie was one of the first real dramas about mental illness, and its release had a huge impact. Half the states in America passed laws improving treatment for mental patients. Most of the changes can be traced back to the shocking revelations that the Snake Pit exposed. The next film that led to changes in the law that literally saved people's lives. Unfortunately, it also caused some deaths in order to get there. In 1927, director Michael Curtis made a biblical epic called Noah's Ark. There was a massive flooding scene, of course, but the director had very few safety measures in place because the law didn't require them. During the filming of the flood, 3 people died. One person was injured so badly sadly, his leg was amputated. Nearly a dozen other people suffered broken bones and injuries. The director was never punished for this horrible tragedy. But new safety laws during the stunt sequences were put in place less than a year after the making of this film. Speaking of horrible tragedies, it took a comedy about a horrible nuclear tragedy for the government to make important safety changes. In 1964, Stanley Kubrick released Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. The movie is about how one deranged Air Force commander leads Russia and the U.S. into a reluctant nuclear war. The movie was darkly funny, but the Department of Defense wasn't laughing. They realized that the weakness and loopholes in the film were actually possible. That's when they instituted stronger new security measures. That comedy may have saved the world from an accidental real nuclear war. Remember Michael Curtis, the director who killed and injured people making Noah's Ark and didn't get in trouble? Well, he did it again a few years later with the 1936 The Charge of the Light Brigade, but this time his victims were horses used in a battle sequence. He made 125 horses do a dangerous stunt. Each was attached to a tripwire that caused them to be flipped over or yanked to the ground. 25 of the horses were so seriously injured that they had to be put down. It was a horrifying tragedy, and thankfully, lead actor Errol Flynn put a stop to it. He called the ASPCA to come to the set, and the public outcry was huge. Public anger grew in 1939 when 2 more horses died from falling off a cliff during the making of the film Jesse James. The backlash from the incidents led to Congress passing animal safety laws for films. Now, all movies have the disclaimer in the closing credits, no animals were harmed or injured during the making of this film. Well, now I know why I see that all the time. The next movie had the honor of destroying the motion picture production code. The production code was a set of rules that all movie studios had to obey in order to release their movies. The code prevented nudity and profanity, but it even outlawed suggestive dancing. All movies had to show good guys win and bad guys lose, with no sympathy shown for villains and no flaws from the heroes. It was a difficult and restrictive time for filmmakers. Then in 1966, an Italian film called Blow Up was released. At the height of the free love 60s, the movie featured sex, drugs, rock and roll, and murder. American studio MGM wanted to release the film in the US, but it would never meet the production code. So they decided that rather than censoring the film, they would create a new company to release the movie. That company had no affiliation with the production code, so that movie could be released as is. The movie was a huge hit and the writing was on the wall. The same year, the production code ended, replaced by a current rating system. The last film is based on a true story, one of the most mysterious and tragic moments in modern American history. The movie is JFK, directed by Oliver Stone and released in 1991. The story about the New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison. The movie follows his efforts to expose the conspiracy to assassinate President Kennedy. The film was an enormous box office success and an Oscar winner. It was also the match that lit the fire burning in the public to know the truth. The year after the film's release, Congress signed a law to reopen the investigation. It was nearly 30 years after the assassination, but people wanted answers. Mystery still surrounded the assassination that may never be fully explained. But the release of JFK showed that a movie could unite an audience and bring about real change. Sometimes it doesn't take violence or force to make real changes in the world. It just takes passion for an art form and to tell the right story at the right time. And there it is, movies that literally change the laws. If you want more stories about the movies and the law, like and comment on this video. Thanks for watching Hammer's Law, and be sure to subscribe for more fun and informative legal content.